Okay, let's talk about styling a modern Next.js app. It can seriously feel like you're trying to find your way through a maze of different options, right? Do you go for raw speed, or do you prioritize scalability for the long haul? If you make the wrong choice early on, it can lead to some major headaches later. So in this explainer, we're going to map out the smartest, most strategic way to handle CSS in your Next.js projects.
This really is the big question, isn't it? Every single time you fire up a new project, you have to ask yourself, what's my priority here? Is it getting a prototype out the door as fast as possible? Or is it building something that's going to be easy to maintain and scale up? Believe me, the choice you make right at the beginning has this huge ripple effect on the entire project.
So here's our game plan. We're going to kick things off with the core challenge that every single developer faces. Then we're going to put the two main contenders, that's Tailwind and CSS Modules, head to head. After that, we'll get into a really powerful hybrid strategy, introduce a little secret weapon to keep your code sparkling clean, and then wrap it all up with a clear framework so you can make the right call every time.
All right, before we dive into the big debates, we have to start where every single project starts, by laying a solid foundation. You know, every Next.js app has this baseline, and that's your global style sheet. This isn't where you're going to style individual buttons or cards. No, this is for setting the stage for your entire app. Think about things like CSS resets, which make sure your app looks the same on every browser. Or, and this is crucial, it's where you import the core stuff for a framework like Tailwind. You just import it once, right in your root layout, and boom, it applies everywhere. It's step one for a clean, organized project.
Okay, now for the main event. In the world of Next.js, there are two officially recommended ways to style your components. And honestly, they come from two completely different schools of thought.
First up, we've got Tailwind CSS. This is what we call the utility-first approach. So instead of making up a CSS class name like, say, Big Blue Button, you apply these tiny single-purpose utility classes right in your HTML. Text blue 500, that just makes your text blue. P4, it just adds some padding. You're literally building your design out of these little Lego blocks right inside your component.
The massive, and I mean massive, win with Tailwind is speed. You can build out interfaces so incredibly fast without ever having to leave your JSX file. It also kind of forces you into a consistent design system, which is great for teams. And because of its just-in-time compiler, the JIT mode, your final CSS bundle is teeny tiny because it only includes the styles you actually used. So what's the catch? Well, your markup can get pretty long and cluttered, and yeah, there's a bit of a learning curve to remember all those utility names. Now, on the other side of the ring, we have CSS Modules. This approach is all about solving one of the oldest, most annoying problems in CSS, everything being global. With CSS Modules, you write plain old CSS in a special .module.css file. When you import it, Next.js does some magic behind the scenes and generates totally unique class names. What does that mean for you? It means the styles you write for your card component will never, ever accidentally mess up your navbar. So the biggest pro here is just pure, unadulterated safety. Your styles are perfectly locked away inside their components, so you never have to worry about class name clashes ever again. And hey, if you know CSS, you already know how to use it. It also keeps that classic separation of your HTML structure and your styles. The downside? It's the workflow. Constantly jumping between your component file and your style file, it can definitely feel a bit slower compared to Tailwind's all-in-one approach. Let's put these two side by side for a second. What's so interesting here is just how different their core ideas are. Tailwind is all about speed and keeping everything in one place, using global utilities that you apply locally. CSS Modules, on the other hand, puts safety and predictability first with that strict local scope. You can see the trade-offs right here. It's basically development speed versus style encapsulation. So what's it going to be? Tailwind for speed or CSS Modules for safety? It feels like you have to pick one, right? But what if I told you that you don't have to choose? Let's talk about the pro-level strategy that gives you the best of both worlds. This right here, this is the insight that changes the whole game. Thinking about this as Tailwind versus CSS Modules is a total trap. The most effective, most scalable strategy for real-world apps is using them together, playing to the strengths of each one. So here's how it works in practice, and it's a super simple three-step workflow. First, you set your global baseline, like we talked about. Second, you use Tailwind for like 90% of everything. It's just perfect for your layouts, your spacing, your basic component styling. But for that last 10%, for those really complex, one-of-a-kind components with tricky animations or lots of state-driven styles,
That's when you pull out CSS modules to keep all that complexity neatly bundled up and easy to read.
Okay, so if you're going to use a ton of utility classes, you're going to hit a very common problem when it comes to conditional styling. But don't worry, there's a tiny little utility that solves this beautifully.
We've all been here, right? You need to apply some classes based on your component's state, like for an active button or a disabled input. And before you know it, your JSX is filled with these messy template strings and ternary operators that are just hard to look at and a total nightmare to change later.
I mean, seriously, this kind of code just feels wrong. It's fragile, it's a pain to debug. There has to be a better way to do this, and thankfully, there is.
And the solution is this fantastic little utility called clsx. Its entire reason for existing is to make this process simple. It gives you a clean, super readable way to mix your static classes with your dynamic, conditional ones. So instead of all that messy string logic, you get this clear function call that makes your components so much easier to understand and work with. All right, we've covered the tools, we've covered the strategy. Let's bring it all home and give you a clear-cut guide on how to choose the right path for your specific project.
Here's your cheat sheet. It's pretty simple. If you're building a small project or just hacking on a prototype, go with 100% Tailwind. The speed you get is just unbeatable. For any serious large-scale application that's going into production, the hybrid approach we just talked about is the gold standard for scalability and maintainability. And hey, if your team is already stacked with Sass experts, don't just throw that knowledge away. Next.js has amazing built-in support for it, so definitely integrate that into your workflow.
And finally, let's just lock in 3 golden rules to live by. 1. Always keep your global styles in that root layout file. 2. Make clsx your best friend. Just make it a habit for any and all conditional classes. It'll save you so many headaches. And 3, and this is maybe the most important, double-check that Tailwind is set up to purge unused styles in production. This is what guarantees you're shipping the absolute smallest CSS file possible, which means a faster experience for your users.
So as you go to start your next project, or maybe even as you look at the one you're working on right now, ask yourself this question. Are you just slapping styles on a page to get the job done, or are you actually building a system that's fast, maintainable, and ready to grow with your app? Because trust me, having the right strategy makes all the difference in the world.